Welcome back to episode 1 of Economica. Let's continue reading. Out came bean soup, fish, millionaire, and bread. The beans were grown by a neighbor. The fish was a type of trout that was shared from a bunch fished out of a canal around the town. And the bread was cheap leftovers from the bakery, apparently. I mean, a generic bakery. There's nothing special. There are certain bakeries that I go to that has good stuff. I thought they might have been leftovers or maybe even poisonous, but it all tasted so good that I was left stunned. So, how much is this going to run me? I asked Lisa as she was making tea. She gave me a bit of a grim look. Perhaps she didn't like talking about money. Roughly 10 mules a day. Isn't that a bit much? I imagine she didn't go out to eat often. It went without saying that the exchange rate for mule was fairly high, so imports from Earth were rather cheap. Lunar cities import a lot of daily essentials, so the effects of the exchange rate were quite obvious. When I looked at Lisa with dissatisfaction, Lisa answered back with a serious face. This includes the lodging. You could have said that earlier. Well, when it comes to money matters, you're to the point, aren't you? It seemed that she was trying to test me. With that, she handed me a cup of tea, but it wasn't the green tea I was used to drinking back at home. It was a type of Chinese tea that used fermented tea leaves, but the name wasn't coming to me. Of course, it's not like I am having fun running away from home only to return when I am out of money, you know. What? But at this rate, won't things get worse? Even if your conviction is strong, what will you do from here? So that's what this was all about. I got it now. Though I can put you up, as you can see around you, we aren't exactly financially well off here. If you run out of resources, it will not be possible to support you. Basically, I'm going to need to work for my meals, right? Exactly. The motto of our church is everyone has a responsibility. A theologian a millennium ago once said that manual labor is sacred. I replied immediately. I have no objections. Oh, how honest. Obviously. In that case, I can introduce you to a variety of jobs. What would you be interested in? I don't know. Freaking landscaping? Huh? While I was out shopping, I gathered together some information from here and there. They are people I've known for a long time, so I can trust them. They are people who've come from hardship, so people like you, well, you can understand. In any case, it seems a lot of them are short-handed. Would you be interested in working in the kitchen, delivery work, construction, or cleaning? Any job, doesn't matter, suits to me. Lisa smiled from the other end of the table. Wait, weren't all of these low-wage jobs for unskilled laborers? That could be another word for minimum wage. Wait a sec, construction work doesn't make that much. Actually, yeah, construction work usually make a lot. I reached out for a neglected piece of bread when my hand was slapped lightly. You know the saying, if a man will not work, he shall not eat. How much will I make at each one of those 4 jobs anyway? Well, the highest would be for delivery. I've been told that you can earn 9 mules an hour for it. Delivery? I'm not sure what kind of expression I had on my face, but whatever it wasn't good. Lisa reacted accordingly. Do you have a problem with it? It's 9 mules. It is true that you will have to do deliveries to places of different distance, but you do have a surprising amount of endurance. It might have been fine with the well laid out Green City and Noon City, but it made me shiver to think about making deliveries in the mess that was the outer sections. 9 mules an hour only amounted to 100 mules a day. The rate of earnings here was pretty low, and given the fact that I'd earned over 10,000 mules at my best in a week, this was out of the question. Besides, it will have to be done in the daytime, wouldn't it? Of course! She stuffed that precarious piece of bread down her throat as she looked menacingly at me. This isn't a job for kids, you know. Or is it that your attention? No, that's not it. Then what? Just want to say it was just something worth it for me to do. After that, Lisa opened her mouth as if to say something, but I didn't really want to have an argument about it, so I reached into my pocket. and I produced some cash that was bundled separately from my wallet. Of course, I kept it for a specific purpose or for some shopping, but it wasn't really a large amount of money. I took the largest notes from the bundle and placed 2 bills on the table. In any case, here's 200 mules, so please let me stay here for 20 days. Honestly, if you kick me out, that would be troublesome. Besides, if you took Hagana out of the picture, this rather cozy place was dirt cheap for 10 mules a day. For one evening, Big Bull Cafe costed 15 mules. Food was extra, and you never knew when the cops would come strolling in. There wasn't any security in the booths either. Staying here 20 days for 200 mules wasn't a bad investment at all. I looked at Lisa. When I did so, Lisa was looking at the 2 100-mule notes I placed before her. Is that okay? When I asked her, Lisa was taken aback as she looked at me. Huh? Right, of course I wouldn't kick you out, but I was a bit concerned about her change of expression. Maybe she thought they were counterfeit? It isn't dirty money or anything. And in my words, Lisa looked a bit flustered as she shook her head. I'm sorry, it isn't that. Then what is it? Then what was it? Or at least that was what I was tempted to say, but given the circumstances, I said nothing. Besides, we already deviated from talking about those crappy jobs, so I did want to put an end to this discussion. If there isn't any problems, I'd like for you to take it. I also want you to not bother me for these 20 days. In my mind, I wanted to add those words, but my face didn't reflect that. Just to make sure, I had some bean soup and helped myself to some bread. Lisa still looked confused, but then she sighed and nodded her head slowly. Okay, I'll take it. Ah. For a brief moment, things proceeded smoothly under this roof. Then, right after I could finally breathe a sigh of relief. But what will you do after this? This woman was persistent. I couldn't hide my displeasure as my poker face cracked. I turned to Lisa and could think of only one thing to say. Let me think about it 20 days from now. This wasn't going to fly, was it? I looked at Lisa, but it seemed that she had given up. I'm not one to talk in this case, I suppose. Huh? Oh, nothing, but you really should think about what you will do after these 20 days. A lifetime is long, and you'll be surprised at how even something like breathing in this city will cost you something. Right. Even though she got angry talking about money, those words she said were particularly powerful. Well, perhaps she hated money because she didn't have much. For some reason, that seemed unlikely. I finished up the remaining millionaire and sopped up the rest of the soup in my bowl with some bread. Lisa took the 2 banknotes that I gave her and placed them in a small accessory box hidden away in the corner of a shelf filled with cookware. It's not like she's a kid stealing some pocket money, but seeing Lisa like this led me to believe that perhaps she had her head in the clouds at this moment. My impression of Lisa was that she was an annoying and stupid woman, but at the same time she was a mature woman who surprisingly had both feet planted firmly on the ground. This was a bit different from before. I could only think of her as being unreliable and airheaded. I wondered why. I was a bit curious, but everyone had their circumstances. After re-evaluating, something else came to mind to ask. Hey. Yes? She looked like she snapped to her senses as she looked up after closing her accessory case and turned to face me. What is it? You were talking about how everyone has to do their own job earlier, but what does that mean? Even that girl works? It's Hagana, not that girl. Hey, she referred to me like that too, you know. Can't you reach a compromise? Besides, she's mostly just shy towards other people. To me, she is a very good girl. Yesterday it didn't look like she was listening to you, though. In any case, it's Hagana, you okay? Hagana. I know. Give me a break here. Jeez. We were talking about Hagana, right? Yeah, she works. For real? For real. I bit my lip as she mimicked me. I got annoyed when she said that I sounded like a street thug, but to copy me like that was irritating. Stop trying to act tough and talk normally. Be quiet, you. I retorted as if I didn't have anything else to say, as if I were a spoiled child. Even though it was unbearable, it seemed like I was no match for Lisa. But it is true, though. That girl is working as a teacher. What? I wasn't putting on airs. I was honestly surprised. Mouth agape, I looked at Lisa and repeated, a teacher. Her? Yep, that girl is very smart after all. Well, she does rather look down on others. On that, it is true that I cannot deny it, but in a way she's always had that look in her eyes. It bothers her sometimes as well, so please don't get too mad at that for me, okay? Huh. I gave a snort of laughter and turned away. I wasn't laughing at her expense, just thinking about how Hagana was self-conscious of her appearance tugged at my heartstrings a bit. That was somewhat cute. She gathers up the neighborhood children and teaches them. She really works hard. Lisa, I used to do something like that in the past, but I wasn't good at it. If it is about the social sciences, then I can handle it, but there isn't exactly demand for that. Huh? Is that so? Hagana specializes in the sciences. She is especially good for math. It's good to have knowledge in what is useful in the world. I attended a university here on the moon, you know. But my concentration was in Catholicism in medieval Europe and its relation to Aboriginal religion. What the heck is that? But yeah, there isn't anyone on the moon who would be interested in studying Earth history, much less religious history. Even the university professor that had come here to take charge of the curriculum had to earnestly beg me to keep the research going, which was a bit of a shock. Well, if you are going to pay for classes, then definitely math or physics. Or if you had even more money, then chemistry or biology. Though medical school is a different matter, in any case, I am well aware of all this. Exactly. I heard all the time that if not for money, then there is nothing to study. It's a deplorable situation. I didn't know whether or not it was that deplorable, but the only problem was that Lisa had chosen to live her life on the moon. In order to succeed on the moon, there was no time to study literature or history. It would be better to major in math-heavy scientific fields, or focus on economics or management, if one were not scientifically inclined. But if Lisa were to have any regrets for that, they would be pretty minuscule. I was able to trust her because somehow it did appear that she had her feet planted firmly on the ground. However, that girl is a teacher, though. I mumbled to myself as I tried to visualize it, in her all-black get-up, looking down on others with her eyes and words, as she taught from the podium, asking why the students didn't understand what was simple to her. If there was a demand for situations like that, I'd certainly never heard about them. For someone with a short fuse like Hagana to have a bunch of bratty little animals as her students, I questioned whether or not that was really a good idea. Any infractions would get a warning the first time, but the second time around she smacked it with a stick without saying another word. It was so fitting that it was scary. I more or less know what you are thinking. Well, who wouldn't hate a teacher like that? Now that you mention it, the children get along rather well with her. Lisa said it quietly as if she were telling me a secret. It appeared that Lisa didn't actually think they got along. Well, she has been an integral part of supporting this church. She gives me everything she earns, you know, even though the Lord warns against greed. He doesn't wish for extreme poverty either. I don't really get it, but I understand that appearances can be deceiving. That's right. If I were to make a decision just on what I see, I wouldn't have come to your aid. Whatever. Thanks for the meal. I'll say that it didn't taste half bad. My, really? But Hagana doesn't really like it much. As I stood up from my chair, something came to mind. Maybe you put a bit too much seasoning in there? I prefer stronger flavors, so it's fine for me, but... Really? My folks were manual laborers, and basically they always prepare things chaotically with strong flavoring, so it's a lot like that. Lisa had one hand on the table and the other clutching her forehead. You could say that it was something of a blind spot. I got it. Thanks. The pasta at the Big Bowl Cafe mixes salt and garlic up very well, and tastes pretty good, by the way. Lisa looked up at the ceiling as if to utter a prayer or something. I shrugged and opened up the computer sitting on the coffee table in front of the sofa, and returned to looking for money makers. The moon had low gravity, so it was common to utilize a spring when doing any weight training. A rod and coil made for that purpose had been sold online and was a rather popular product. However, it was questionable how many who bought it actually used it. After all, the fitness company who made a fortune selling sets of rods and coils had managed to sell over 3 million sets, including similar items, but no matter how you looked at it, any single set would have been more than sufficient. In fact, the population on the moon was about 700,000 people, although tourists would send that number up to 1 million. There were many people out there who would buy it and not use it, knowing that a new model was on the way. Even if the equipment was used properly, there was the matter of using it for more difficult applications, and then the user manual would neglect to note this. The words of my stubborn, old-fashioned father would repeat in my head while I did weight training. With weights on my arms, shoulders, back, and abs, I would do balance training involving headstands and light somersaults, which go on for no more than 20 minutes. Since I wasn't aiming to be an athlete, any training beyond that wasn't really necessary. If nothing else, the people who came from the town my folks were from, the kind who could never tell a lie, would all say in unison to take care of the body, for it will always be useful. With the heights of net prosperity and the lower gravity and the near unlimited supply of electrical power on the moon, physical labor was categorized as being the lowest of the low in terms of recognition. There weren't any people who had made it big with physical labor. At best, there was always the consideration of those who worked in show business. But even then, the ones who got paid the big money weren't the actors who toiled away in their craft, but the people who managed them. However, after leaving home and taking the time to observe things outside the boundaries of the rules of society, I had come to understand that there was a lot of truth in those words. Even after evading the police sent to bring me back home, I realized that there was some useful advice to be had. As expected of those seasoned veterans who escaped from the jaws of guerrilla fighters, secret police, and military juntas, I wiped the sweat off with a towel and put on my clothes, the same clothes Lisa and Hagana were complaining about before. After 2 washes, I probably finally got rid of the smell, but I had a feeling that I had washed away something like an important marker of readiness that had been stained into the clothing in the last 3 months. The one thing I had become aware of after leaving home was that people were relaxed by the smell of detergent. The word cleanliness had a rather weak image. Then again, this wasn't half bad. Next morning. Holy crap. I stretched my back and tossed my backpack over my shoulder. Since today was Sunday and the trading houses were closed, it was an important day for me as I go out and just walk around. It also appeared that the culprit from the theft was arrested, so the odds of being mistakenly arrested and taken home had diminished. It was just as Lisa suspected. The culprit was a young man who also had run away from home, leaving home without any means, turning to a life of crime and causing trouble for others. This guy was clearly the typical idiot. It's possible that he wasn't from Earth, but was born and raised on the moon. As someone born and raised on the moon myself, I could sympathize. But for people from Earth, it seemed that the lower gravity was to blame for making many people lightheaded. Aside from issues of pride, many could live on the collected scraps left over from the geniuses and prodigies of Newton City, who had amassed great fortunes. Some would say that it was the fault of this sense of security, perhaps. Compared to the people who came to the moon from Earth, within the groups of tourists were also those who came here from some great sense of purpose. They came to the moon to do something or another. It could be that they came to find a tranquil life they couldn't find back on Earth. Likewise, they might have come to find a thrilling life that couldn't be found back on Earth. After all, I understood that one must step forward when one had a purpose at hand. Anyway, the cost to take the orbital elevator by any legal means was staggering, and there were many hurdles to clear if you were to look for any discounts or exemptions. In any case, there were many Earth dogs who knew where they came from where they were, and what they should be doing. Literally, there was Earth on the bottom of their shoes. That was why I hated these Earth dogs. Oh, a little hallway right there. Look at that. I tied up my shoes and left through the hallway. The place was eerily quiet. Lisa had headed out to the restaurant after eating breakfast. I knew that Hagana was still here, but outside of going to the toilet, she would seclude herself in her room, and you couldn't even hear a peep coming out of there. I had no idea what she was doing in there, but I got eerie vibes. That was why I had everything I owned in my backpack. I wouldn't be surprised if Hagana took a hammer to my PC and destroyed it while I was out. I did not continue walking down the corridor towards the living room. Instead, I went up the stairs to the second floor. The church was in a low-income area, much like everything else around. It was built upon parts of a crater that had been partially zoned, so navigating the sector was a bit complex. The entrance to the sector was along a relatively wide street, but the second and third floor portions seemed to cling to the cliffs as they stretched upward. According to Lisa, these places weren't very well off financially. The faded parts of buildings here and there around the church were obvious, but they appeared neither small nor inexpensive. Ascending the narrow steps took you to two rooms that looked out in a small yard, from which you could see the sky park. As they were both on a slant, the rooms themselves were small. One of them was apparently Lisa's. There was a white painted chair and table in the small garden, and if you were to ascend the stairs another level, they became more like a ladder. What functioned as a handrail was actually what Lisa used to carry, a basket of laundry. There was a room, or rather a storage shed, on the third floor, and past that you could reach a site near the roof. The door was wooden, but there was a note on it with a handwritten note from Lisa that said to always lock the door when leaving. I was sure people had been locked down many times. I, of course, would be returning through the front entrance, and with that I headed out. We got a nice looking view at the... I kind of wish there was like a button for me to do that, but whatever. No, not yet. The moon was in the middle of the 2-week-long afternoon, and the light that permeated the dome over this lunar city during this time felt rather good. Today I could see Earth from the usual place. This yard had something of an extravagant feel to it, with a large tree growing very close to a cliff behind it. I wondered if the placement of the table and chair were so Lisa and Hagana could enjoy the shade of the tree. We got some nice looking buildings, a little bit of a downtown there, and above in the sky it kind of looks like Earth. So yeah. Shade of the tree. The cliffs all around gave the place a feeling of isolation. It was a nice place. Right now there was only the noise of the laundry machine, and it was clear that what belonged to whom. Looking over the jumbled streets of the 6th outer section, you could see someone on the roof casually reading something on a computer terminal, and someone repairing a roof. You could see bakeries and a dry cleaner, buildings spewing out water vapor from misshapen chimneys, and homes under construction. However, my objective wasn't to survey that area. It would be nice to scale the cliff in the back and roam around the plateau above, but I'd probably end up on someone's property and they'd call the cops on me. I moved nimbly between the houses seen from the park, and having found the continuation of the path towards the top of the plateau, broke into a run as I left the park. What was before me was what I had seen from the park. Before me were the buildings in Newton City that pointed in the direction of Earth. Ooh. I left the 6th outer section's business district and got on board the rather boringly named Lunar Development Train. Really? It literally was a train from the time the lunar surface was being developed, and at the station's starting point and terminus there was a diorama of an individual in a spacesuit doing work in the lunar desert. No matter how much you could visit it virtually on the net, tourists still flocked to the diorama, as if showing some deference of gratitude as they took pictures of it. Once, someone had the bright idea of making an incision in it to accommodate a box, so tourists would mistake it for a donation box. Supposedly it was filled to the brim with coins. However, what that guy failed to realize was that after only a few hours, the foolish tourists would have filled the box with donations. They they would complain to the station attendant that they couldn't put any more in. Thus, the plan was foiled. After that, capitalizing on that idiot's bright idea, the station attendants installed a large, unmarked box to collect small change from tourists. This was a classic example of a moment of carelessness toppling even a good get-rich scheme. There wasn't a lot of living space on the moon, so the lunar development train almost seemed to apologize, as it shrank down and sped through the city. The train passed alongside the chaotic mismatch of buildings, and for a brief moment it was possible to look out the window to see into the lives of the people inside. The tourists took great amusement seeing their own country's culturally styled buildings and lifestyles. Of course, there were no cultural aspects I particularly saw that amused me at all. The moon was made up of a hodgepodge of immigrants. On top of that, it was a place where people who couldn't shake off Earth's gravity gathered, so the coloring was way too pale. That was why one could say that the line performed very well. Even those from my hometown who hoped to accomplish something would resolutely look coldly at all this. This was the moon, after all, not Earth. As we passed each station, the townscape changed accordingly. From a chaotic atmosphere to orderly streets, the stateless nature of the state became more evident. Buildings, both straight and with elegant curves that did not exist in the natural world, multiplied as perfectly trimmed trees grew in number. We had entered the White Belt. There were many advertisements within the train directed at the typical salaryman, with information on insurance for families. Again, the ground gradually lowered and the train slowly separated from it. The beautiful cityscape unfolded below, and soon we were traveling at the height equal to that of a 10-story building. No matter how beautiful a building was, there would still be provisions for the many complexities in life, as one would expect. Everywhere you looked, the green of parks could be seen, and one could look down to see large canals. Alright, so I'm just going to end it here for now. So let's see next part. I'm not sure how this one will go, but let's continue on to more adventurous of the outdoors next time. So like, comment, and subscribe, and see you guys later. Have a good one.